Halloween may not be until next month, but this doll is already giving people the creeps.
Nothing's cuter than a little girl and her doll. But whoa, what is this? 3-year-old Briar Beard goes everywhere with her scary-looking doll. Chloe.
She said, "I love this doll, Mommy. Look at this doll. I'm its mommy, and it needs me. I have to have it." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Everywhere she goes, people do double takes.
Oh my gosh,
Its eyes light up. Yeah.
What? Oh my gosh.
When you push its tummy, its eyes light up.
Oh
And
my
then
God.
it has this really cute little baby giggle that turns into an evil laugh.
That is
Yeah.
not a cute little baby giggle.
It's not.
Not at all.
When this spooky image showed up on Charlotte Whitey Hale's surveillance cameras, she recognized it immediately. She believes her England barbershop is haunted by the ghost of her own mother.
One particular evening, I checked my cameras and I looked and thought, oh my gosh, is that you, Mummy? So I actually spoke. She moved slightly to one side and came back, and at that point, obviously, it showed it was my mother. I had no doubt in my mind whatsoever it was my mum.
Charlotte's mom, Yvonne Dorothy, died of an illness 8 years ago. She thinks the spirit is her mom not only because of what she sees, but what she smells. Burnt buttered toast, a familiar scent she associates with her mother.
So basically at that point, even customers can smell buttered burnt toast. We always go outside to check if the smell's coming from the Helter Skelter, which is obviously the local pub. But generally, no smell, it's here and then disappears.
Hey, anybody see a ghost?
To be 100% sure, Charlotte brought in paranormal investigators to check out the footage. They couldn't find any evidence proving it wasn't a ghost. Charlotte has no plans to hire an exorcist to rid her shop of the ghoul. She says she was close to her mother in life and wants to remain that way.
I do believe that the reason why my mummy came to the shop was because she loved to be a part of it, the kind of lady she was. And I do believe, still is, she had to be a part of everything. So she basically would say, "My Charlotte, look at my Charlotte, wow."
Still watching, this time from another dimension, not so far away.
Do I believe in life after death? Do I believe in communication with the dead? That's a complicated question, and I still am investigating. My name is Mira Patassin, and I'm the author of The In-Betweens, The Spiritualists, Mediums, and Legends of Camp Etna. I've always been interested in the topic of death and mortality, because who isn't? And what happens after we die? While I was living in Maine, a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, suggested I check out this interesting camp called Camp Etna that I knew nothing about. And she said it's a camp for spiritualists. So I looked up what spiritualism was on the internet. I had no idea what it was, and I learned that it was actually a real, legitimate religion, and that it was founded by women, and it was a religion that still existed. But the one thing that stood out about this religion is that the practitioners all believe they have the capability to communicate directly with the dead. The people who practice spiritualism say it's been around forever, but it was formally started in 1848 when these two young teenagers, two sisters, Margaret and Kate Fox, they told their mother that they could communicate with a dead person who was living in the walls of their home. And they start showing how they can communicate by asking a question, and then the ghost would make a clicking sound, and they did like this Morse code thing. So the mother was shocked, she told the father told the neighbors, word started spreading, and these two young girls, teenagers, became very, very famous very, very quickly. And then, not long after the Fox sisters made their debut, the Civil War happened, and thousands and thousands and thousands of souls died all at once, and the whole country was grieving, and there was nothing set up for them to really deal with these losses. So these two sisters kind of became the poster children for a new way of dealing with grief. And so seances started popping up all around the country, just like they were brunches. So people just started diving into this practice, and about maybe 30 years after the Fox sisters made their debut, there were millions of followers of spiritualism in the United States. Some of the people who we find to be the most well-respected names in American history were practicing spiritualists. Sojourner Truth was a spiritualist. Abraham Lincoln and his wife, I know that there were a lot of mediums that came to the White House. Even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who is known for writing the Sherlock Holmes mysteries, he was one of the most ardent practitioners of spiritualism, and he actually wrote the 2 volumes of the history of spiritualism.
But this thing is not the foolish thing which is so often represented, but that it really is a great philosophy.
At Camp Etna, you have to be a member of the Spiritualist Church. You don't have to be a medium, but you do have to be an active member of the church there. Mediums live at Camp Etna, and mostly women. A few men come, and they basically are just relaxing on their porches, and when visitors are welcome to drive in, anyone is allowed to come to Camp Etna, with or without an appointment in the summertime. And you can walk up to one of the cottages and say, can you connect me with a loved one or a loved one passed? They have church services, they'll have guest speakers, they have meditation services, they have seance services, they call them message circles. So there's a big difference between a medium and a psychic. A psychic is someone who apparently can tell you the future and the past. A medium is a psychic, but they can also communicate with the dead. So there's a big difference between the two, and from what I've been told, all mediums are psychics, but not all psychics are medium. And at the same time, not all mediums are spiritualists. Spiritualism is the religion, so there may be a medium who can see dead people walking around in the street, but they are not necessarily part of a spiritualist church. You don't have to be a medium to be a spiritualist. You can just attend the church and not have any of those otherworldly abilities. I spent 5 years with the people of Camp Etna, commuting back and forth from my home on a little island in Maine to their little commune in Etna. Basically, I participated in a lot of their activities as sort of like their sidekick medium, even though I can't communicate with the dead. I think it's very safe to be a skeptic. I was a skeptic going into this piece, into this book, into this camp, saying I'm going to be very objective, but I also really want to see a ghost. And as it was the end of a few years spending time with these women, and I was on my way out, one of the mediums that I'd gotten closest to, Dr. Barbara Williams, said, "You're not leaving yet. I want you to go back into this church and sit in on this class." There were 2 other women in the class, and the instructor is teaching us about how to cleanse your aura after you go to Walmart or something. And all of a sudden, one of the women in the class starts breathing really quickly, and she looks very, very frightened, and she starts pointing towards the door. And she's going like this, and she says, "I know I'm not crazy. I'm sorry to interrupt, but does anybody see that man standing in the corner over there?" And I look around and I don't see anybody. And the other woman in the class looks around, she doesn't see anybody. But the instructor says, "It's okay, I see him too, and he's not gonna hurt you." She said, "Do you know somebody named Phil? Because he's touching your shoulder." And it turns out my father's name is Phil, but my father is still living. And she said, "He's your father's uncle. He's who your father's named after." And she started giving me this message really quickly, and she really didn't want to because she was terrified. And this is one of the first times this had ever happened to her. And so I sat there and watched the teacher coach the student on how to process and deliver a message from a dead person, even when she didn't want to. And it was so specific and so accurate, and she gave me information that no one knew, with specific dates and specific names and things that my family members didn't even know until we looked it up in some records. Also, to witness her freaking out was just incredible. And that's when I left the camp and I was like, I am a believer. I'm a believer. It was absolutely bonkers. The mediums that I've worked with and the mediums that I've written about, they tell me if we are 80% correct, that means we're really, really, really good. And if you come to me and I can't give you a message, I'll give you your money back. They're not in it for the money, but you do have to find the right mediums, just like you want to find a professional doctor. But even the mediums I've studied with and spoke with tell me that they themselves are skeptical of what they're doing. Like sometimes they question their own sanity, but they just kind of let go and let it come through. And to witness this communication with a medium and a person who's grieving is really astounding. And even to have them have given messages to me in the past was really astounding too. Now people ask me, are you a skeptic after doing all this work with mediums? And I'm not. After spending so much time with them, I've seen them in action, and I've had them they've given me very subjective messages from loved ones who've passed, and there's no way they could have been making it up. There's no way they could have Googled it either. It's been really incredible. I spent years around a community of spiritualists, and coming out of this, they really unintentionally taught me what I believed in and what my faith was and how to have faith in myself.
Usually parents are the ones scolding their children, but the tables turned in Georgia when...
We need to have a talk, Mom. There are 6 packages at this front door. Come on.
A mom who liked to online shop was caught red-handed and called out.
You happy about this? You happy about? I hope so. I love you. I'm not judging. I'm just saying. 6. All right, I'm done messing with you. I love you. Mwah.
A mother of 2 says her friends told her to run after she showed them this creepy footage. Now Melissa Smith is convinced she's being haunted by the baby she lost in a miscarriage. Melissa from Toronto, Ontario, says she's always been a paranormal skeptic. But when she saw this image of what appears to be a baby's face looking at her daughter sleeping in her crib, she thought again. Melissa suffered a miscarriage in September of 2016. She claims that same night, a children's toy turned on by itself and started playing music in the middle of the night. Since then, odd things have happened around her house. Strange knocks on the door and closet doors swinging open. But this, she says, is the most conclusive proof that her home is being haunted by her unborn baby. When she saw this face appear on the baby monitor, she freaked out. Melissa says she thinks her daughter was trying to get away from the entity. And when it comes to knowing if it really was the spirit of her child she lost, she says she'll let someone else decide. Did a ghost just lift up the handle of this old Victorian hearse? A paranormal investigator believes it did. It happened at the Haunted Museum in Nottingham. Watch the spooky footage for yourself. Investigate the glass. It could have been a ghost, like the one a woman in Illinois believes she saw looking out of a window of a mansion built in 1905. Christy Rainier took this photo. She believes the face she captured belongs to Ginevra King, a socialite who inspired the character Daisy Buchanan in F. Scott Fitzgerald's classic novel, The Great Gatsby.
Did she tell you how she found me that night?
This is her former summer home located in the town where she and Fitzgerald dated for 2 years. 2 investigators say when they asked if any spirits wanted to take a picture with them at this haunted location, these blurs showed up later in the photos. And a personal trainer in South Wales says he was attacked by an angry cave ghost seen in this video. So if you believe in spirits, get out your camera. One could be ready for its close-up.
The city of Amarillo, Texas needs our help trying to figure out what this strange creature is.
Our zoo staff the other day was going back through some surveillance footage and happened to catch a still shot of an unidentified figure that was out behind the zoo itself.
Michael says they don't have videos of the object, just this pic.
It's just a game camera, and so it was just taking still shots. And so that was the only shot we were able to capture of that particular figure. So there's no pictures before, there's no pictures after.
It popped up at Thompson Park in the early hours on May 21st.
Nobody was in the facility, no animals were impacted throughout this.
And he says it's not an animal from their nearby Amarillo Zoo.
We've got everything from tigers and lions to bison. And so there's nothing that we have in the zoo that would resemble any of those figures outside. It's kind of a unique thing, a unique picture that we just happened to catch.
Now, city officials want help determining what it is, and the suggestions are pouring in.
Whether it's from a raccoon standing on its hind legs to just an individual walking through the park. So we've seen a little bit of everything in terms of comments.
Until they determine what it is, the city is still taking tips to identify this UAO, or unidentified Amarillo object.
What is this? And the more people we shared it with, the more people were like, I don't know what it is. And so it really started to raise some curiosity. And so that's where we pushed it out to the rest of our community to say, hey, help us figure out what this could be.
Are these pictures evidence of an otherworldly encounter? Financial executive Janae Rickwalder thinks they might be. Here's her story.
I was at a conference in Savannah, and we just impromptu decided that we were going to take a ghost trip. They had this trip where they were like, you know what? We will take you to the most haunted places in Savannah. And we went to a couple cemeteries, and, they tried to scare us, and we weren't really buying it so much. Then they took us to what they called the most haunted house in Savannah. And of course, I was like, whatever.
That house was the Sorrel Weed House, a famous landmark that was the boyhood home of a Confederate general. Robert E. Lee visited there on multiple occasions. The opening shots of Forrest Gump were filmed on the house's roof. So it's got some history.
I thought, you know what, I better take some pictures for my husband and my son because they'll be interested in seeing this. So I'm taking pictures, and the tour's over at this point in time. The tour guide has done, he's moved on, and it's just a group of us that are just walking out around randomly. And I just, took some pictures, and I noticed a swoosh, and I'm like, what the heck is that? And at first I thought my eyes were just playing tricks on me, and when I looked at the picture, there was actually, you could see the swoosh in the picture, and I'm like, oh, no way. So I kept trying to take pictures to see if I could recapture it again and again and again. Couldn't capture anything, but I'm seeing in my phone, I'm seeing lights, and I'm seeing dust, and I did see those orbs, and I always thought that was a load of crock because, I'm like, no, you're not seeing it, but I saw them. And so I'm freaking out a little bit. So I call my friends to come over, and they, I'm like, look, can you see this? Can you see what's going on? They're like, oh yeah, whatever, Janae, you're full of it. So then I said, you know what, you guys, you need to come look through my phone. So they came to look through my phone, like, oh my God. And they started seeing it. And then all of a sudden, there was a bright orb back here in front of me, a bright orb on the other side, and one that started coming towards me. I took a picture of it, and then I hightailed it out of there because I was just like, that's freaky. That's what I caught on camera. So that was really kind of cool.
A representative from Savannah Terrors says this sort of thing isn't as rare as you think.
When I first started doing these tours, we always ask people at the beginning, are you believers or are you skeptics? We usually get about half and half. They're a little bit balanced. But as we start giving the tours and we get to the end, it actually happens more often than you think, even for the skeptics.
Rickwalder says she wasn't scared by the incident, but it did help her rethink some things.
This experience has converted me to believing in the great beyond. Maybe the moral to this story is don't be so beholden to your beliefs because they might not necessarily be completely true.
This is Inside Edition.Ghost.
Look out! That's a cheetah in the back seat. An American tourist from Seattle was on safari in Tanzania when the curious cat jumped into the Jeep. The safari guide told Britton Hayes not to move a muscle. He sits frozen with fear as the cheetah checks things out. It even gets worse. Another cheetah joins the party and prowls on the hood. All this American can do is hope for the best and pray he's not on the dinner menu. Thankfully, he survived unscathed.
He ain't afraid of no ghost.
I'm not playing, look at this.
When Scott Denton took his children to the park in Warwick, Rhode Island, he says he saw a real-life poltergeist.
It's going faster! Look at it!
The kids didn't want to get out of the truck. They were all nervous.
He posted on social media, and since then the video has gone viral with over 6 million hits.
Recorded the whole event. The kids kind of started getting freaked out. I started getting like goosebumps on my neck.
Skeptics weighed in online with Scott's
Manipulated, it's the real deal.
Look, ain't nobody here. It's been a joke.
Nobody.
Could this spooky face be the ghost of Jason Griffith's grandpa? After snapping the photo at his grandpa's old house, the amateur ghost hunter decided to find out. Jason's grandfather, Alan, and his grandmother, Maureen, lived in this house in Wolverhampton, England, for many years. Alan died 2 years ago, and since then, there's been some unusual activity there, Jason says.
Again? Hello?
Relatives have seen a shadowy man walk through the garden and have heard mysterious knocks like this one.
We might go live in night vision. What was that?
So Jason convinced his best friend, Steven, to come by and check it out.
Whoa! That is horrible. Something just like, it was like a footstep right next to me.
The pair often go ghost hunting together, posting their videos to social media. Jason says he felt compelled to find out what was going on at the house after discovering that the ghostly face in the photo looks a lot like Alan's. And while they were there, Steven says he felt a presence behind him on the stairs.
Can hear noises, hold on. Ice cold. Hello? There's something behind me. The hairs are standing up on the back of my neck. Are you right behind me?
A ghostly presence the pair are determined to keep investigating.
There is something special about Charleston.
People don't like to leave Charleston, even when they die.
Some of the nation's most beautiful homes are in Charleston. They're hundreds of years old, and yet many believe their original owners are still hanging around. The James English house stayed in his family for 7 generations, and yet descendant Elizabeth Lucas is quite sure she's encountered long-lost limbs from the family tree.
I have heard the parties downstairs on the first floor.
Ghost parties?
I assume they were ghost parties. In the middle of the night, I would hear them walking around on the wooden floors. I would hear them slamming doors. I would hear them walking all the way up to the 3rd floor. And when they would get to this step, I would say, "Who's there?" And they would just...
Sally Weil, who spent a lot of time in the house, was a skeptic, but says she has changed her mind.
I would come in the front, the porch, and on the way in there were 4 or 5 rockers along the porch, and just one of them would be rocking. The rest were not moving. I was told that this was the one chair that Mrs. Lucas sat in regularly every afternoon to rock.
Another ghostly Charleston place, the Swordgate House, an old 1700s mansion that in the 1800s served as a school for very proper girls. They were locked behind iron gates and imposing brick walls to keep out amorous men.
In the case of Marie Whaley, she was sent here because of a relationship with a suitor that wasn't proper for the family.
The lovesick Miss Whaley climbed the wall, sneaked off to marry her man, and thereby wrecked the school's reputation.
After the school shut down, the elegant old mansion sat empty for a long time, until eventually it found a new incarnation as the Swordgate Inn.
Walter Barton ran the place, but started hearing complaints from guests, like a pair of honeymooners.
It was the 3rd night, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, very frightened, they left the hotel and went to another one.
The husband later blamed their departure on
my ghost and how it scared his wife.
The old place is shut down again for now. The ghosts, whom Barton says he's heard, have the run of the place. So, somewhere amid the dust and memories of centuries gone lies the answer to the question, Are these old mansions truly the playgrounds of ghosts or of people's imaginations?
Could this be a ghost? Watch as an otherworldly blob floats across the Tower of London before disappearing into the sky. Evidence of the potential supernatural phenomena was captured by the camera of a paranormal investigator named Mark Vernon. The Tower of London is a good candidate for haunting. The historic castle was built over several centuries and is almost 1,000 years old, so it's seen a thing or two. It was used as a prison and a place of execution during its long history. It was the final residence of Anne Boleyn. She was beheaded there in 1536. Queen Elizabeth I spent some time imprisoned there, courtesy of her sister, Queen Mary. And Guy Fawkes, who tried and failed to blow up Parliament in the 17th century, was tortured there. The last person to be executed at the tower was a German spy named Joseph Jacobs, who met his end courtesy of a firing squad. These are just some of the candidates for the possible haunting, though it could also just be a spooky shadow.
Did a ghost move this chair back and forth? Or was it just the wind? Watch, this patio umbrella opens unaided. This door just shuts itself. And so do these saloon doors. Then an item on the table suddenly moves, and the bar stool does too. The answer might be haunting, which gives us chills to the bone.
It's your first look inside the house known as the Portal to Hell, a place where demons supposedly wrought havoc with a helpless family in horror straight out of The Exorcist.
That the power of Christ compels you!
This man just bought the notorious house in Gary, Indiana for the bargain basement price of $35,000.
What compelled you to buy this house?
I have a passion for investigating claims of paranormal.
Zach Bagans is the host of the Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures. We spoke inside the front porch, the precise spot where a terrorized mom claims that horseflies mysteriously swarmed in the dead of winter, as they did in the Amityville Horror. Then there was that mysterious figure that appeared in the window when the house was supposed to be empty. This is the other side of that window.
There are reports that there was a residue that would come down the blinds. It was horrible.
This is the woman who lived in the House of Horrors with her 3 children before Zach Bagans bought it. LaToya Ammons fought back tears when she told us how they fled in terror after her daughter was raised right off her bed. She says the demons sounded like this.
We've waited 5 months. It sounded like something dead.
She says she anointed the rooms with holy oil and read aloud from the Bible, but the nightmare went on and listened to a sound that cannot be explained by police who looked into the mysterious goings-on. While 2 cops are talking in the basement, someone can be heard saying, "Hey." Embrace yourself for what LaToya says happened to her son when she and her mom took him to the hospital. It's right out of the movie Poltergeist.
He walked up the wall and did the backwards flip.
How did everybody in the hospital react to your son walking up the wall?
They took off and they ran. The doctor from the psych ward said that's not real. That's not human. No human can do that.
Speaking of deep, mysterious voices,
You in there!
those are the chilling words Captain Charles Austin will never forget. The 36-year veteran of the Gary, Indiana Police Department had just finished investigating strange occurrences in the house and was in his patrol car talking on the phone when he says something bizarre happened.
All of a sudden, while I'm involved in this conversation, the AM/FM radio went to static and turned up very loud. And it said, "You in there?" And the person on the phone say, "What the hell was that?" And I say, "I don't know."
What was your reaction?
I was in shock.
Enter Father Michael Maginot, a local priest who got permission from the Bishop of Gary, Indiana, to perform an exorcism on LaToya.
Did you at one point believe this house was the portal to hell?
There was a portal.
LaToya moved out of the house and now lives many miles away. She knows her story is hard to believe.
Some people claim that you made this all up, that this was some sort of an elaborate hoax. Is this a hoax?
No, I don't feel that someone will have a reason to make something up like that.
Do you believe that house is possessed by demons?
I do. I feel that it's something very bad going on in that house.
Could this be the face of a famous ghost caught on camera? One woman thinks so. Christy took the photo of what appears to be a face looking out of a window. She believes it belongs to Ginevra King, a socialite who inspired the character Daisy Buchanan in F. Scott Fitzgerald's classic novel, The Great Gatsby.
I never had a drink before, I said, but oh, how I do enjoy it.
The photo was taken at King's former summer home in Lake Forest, Illinois, the same town where she and Fitzgerald dated for 2 years. It's believed just before the two broke up, King's father told the writer,
"Rich girls don't marry poor boys."
The 14-room mansion was built in 1905. Christy photographs it just about every year. She didn't see the image in this year's annual photo until her husband pointed it out later that day. Now she says what appeared was definitely Ginevra, and it's turned Christy from skeptic to believer. I'm Kelly Nealon for InsideEdition.com.
Powerful stories that change the way you think. Impactful investigations that change the way you see.
How many times has your car been stolen?
5 times.
Yeah.
What?
Do you think that you're a responsible owner of tigers?
I damn sure do.
I love them. Heartwarming moments that change the way you feel.
I feel amazing.
Now available in a place that changes the way you watch TV. Inside Edition, streaming.
It's like a scene from The Shining.
Here's Johnny.
A man staying at one of the country's most famous haunted hotels took this eerie image of a figure standing at the top of a stairwell at the Stanley Hotel in Colorado. Some speculate they see 2 people. Henry Yu visited the tourist destination after hearing how it inspired Stephen King to write the novel turned movie.
Stay with me.
Henry says he heard the place was haunted, but never imagined he would capture what appears to be a ghost. He explains he wanted to take a panoramic photo of the grand stairwell in the lobby. He didn't remember seeing anyone standing there because he usually doesn't like people in his pictures. When he took it, he didn't notice anything, but overnight he started feeling sick. The next morning, he looked at the photo again, and sure enough, there was the silhouette. Now that's spooky.
I'm Dr. Richard Gallagher. I'm a board-certified psychiatrist and obviously a physician, trained at Yale. I was an undergraduate at Princeton.
Dr. Richard Gallagher has your standard set of medical qualifications, but also
I'm now the longest-standing American member of the International Association of Exorcists as a non-exorcist, of course.
Dr. Gallagher lends his expertise to some unusual cases.
These are people that I consult upon, usually at the request of clergy of different faiths, especially Catholics, because I'm a Catholic believer myself, but I have dealt with clergy of pretty much all faiths. And I evaluate them, and I do a very thorough standard evaluation, and then I usually tell the individual I'm consulting upon, as well as the clergy, whether I think this can be explained as a medical or psychiatric disorder. And they make the official diagnosis, but obviously I'm going to have a strong opinion as someone very experienced in the field, whether they might have a demonic attack, which comes in different varieties, the most serious of which is possession. I don't want to give the impression that I think these conditions, at least possessions, are anything but rare, but I am aware that there's more of these cases than most people understand to be the case.
What's Dr. Gallagher looking for when he's called in for one of those special consultations?
Most people would use the modern term, there has to be something paranormal. Although I think the word paranormal is somewhat pseudoscientific, and there's a lot of fringe stuff that gets included under that category. There are these remarkable things like, rare levitations, or people going into a trance and speaking all kinds of foreign languages, or people exhibiting very, very strange, bizarre movements and possessing an enormous strength that is clearly beyond normal human nature, as well as people who have what they call hidden knowledge. Is a classic Latin term for that, latra. They possess knowledge of stuff that they couldn't know otherwise. The criterion are strongly suggestive of a foreign entity or intelligence that has somehow attacked and is in some way within the personality or taking over the consciousness of the victim. In the Christian faith in general, we believe they're fallen angels. Then there is a very malevolent voice that comes out of this individual.
Keep away! The soul is mine!
This personality basically hates human beings, hates God, and hates anything religious or sacred. So you see this sort of malevolent, hateful, nasty, arrogant, prideful personality.
It sounds like something right out of the horror classic The Exorcist. But Dr. Gallagher insists this sort of thing actually happens, like with a patient he called Julia.
During the exorcism, she spoke foreign languages. She exhibited enormous strength. She struggled against the people restraining her literally for hours, exhausting, about 5 people who were trying to hold her. And she also had other psychic abilities.
How does an Ivy League educated physician end up dealing with exorcisms?
I was brought up Catholic, so, I had an open mind about these things.
Dr. Gallagher shares his experiences in his new book, Demonic Foes: My 25 Years as a Psychiatrist Investigating Possessions, Diabolic Attacks, and the Paranormal.
I don't think there's any contradiction between, science and faith. Faith is supposed to be based on some evidence. The evidence is a little bit different than what the modern conception of science is. I'm a doctor. I try to help suffering people, even if they have a controversial diagnosis. So that's why I got involved.
This is Inside Edition Digital. No one was about to challenge this picnic crasher. A family was enjoying a meal at a national park in Mexico when a black bear joined the feast. The humans sat very still and quietly while the bear went at their enchiladas and tacos. The terrified family could only wait. A woman shielded a child in case the bear took an interest in humans. They were incredibly relieved when the bear had its fill and decided to leave.
Is there a ghost in this photo, or is it just an optical illusion? Check out those fingers resting on the girl's shoulder. It's hard to tell who they belong to, since all the girls seem to have their arms crossed. This picture from more than 100 years ago of girls working in a linen factory resurfaced after a relative sent it in to the website Belfast Live. Earlier this year, a man captured what appeared to be a ghost at the hotel that inspired The Shining. So far, no one's confirmed either were ghosts. But the new Ghostbusters movie is coming out. Maybe they can weigh in.
It's a class 4 operation.
This scene left a mother terrified. It's almost straight out of a horror movie. It may only seem like a young boy riding his bike, but look closer. Could that be a real ghost? Louise Lenton caught the apparition on camera while filming her 5-year-old son. He was cycling in circles on his bike at Oldway Mansion in England, a property dating back to the 19th century. Lenton didn't see the ghostly image until she looked at the video while at home. When she asked officials about the mystery figure, they told her only security would have been inside that building that day. And check this out. Watch as something floats across the Tower of London. The camera person tracks the object as it moves just before it disappears into the sky. The Tower of London is almost 1,000 years old. During that time, it was known to be both a prison and a place of execution. Could these be real-life sightings of ghosts, or just spooky coincidences? We may never know.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Something just hit my truck. Something just hit my truck. Holy.
This teen says his truck is haunted.
Well, I'm done. I'm done. Something just hit my truck. Something just hit my truck. Something just hit my truck.
Paranormal buff Troy Vance says spirits have always been attracted to him. But when he photographed what looks like the ghost of a drowned boy in the front seat of his truck, it may have been too much. He says it wasn't the first time something freaky happened in his vehicle.
What's that perfume smell I'm smelling right now? Her?
Troy says after trying to record sounds of growls and whispers he heard in his truck.
Who's her? Does she not like it when I mess with the truck late at night or what?
Someone or something banged on his car.
I'm getting really... Oh! Whoa, 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 whoa! Something just hit my truck. Something just hit my truck. Holy...
Using a device to communicate with the paranormal.
Well, I'm done.
Troy tried to speak with the dead boy he thought he photographed in his car, but instead thinks he got the spirit of a woman.
What's that perfume smell I'm smelling right now?
As for what the ghostly images he shot, we may never know.
Have they felt the sting of her tears? They will. And she will come for them. Who? La Llorona.
She's the phantom figure terrifying fans at the box office, the weeping woman known in Spanish as La Llorona. The film from producer James Wan that stars Linda Cardellini has already proved a big hit. But what's the true story of La Llorona? The movie has its roots in a well-known folktale. Legend has it La Llorona wanders the earth weeping for her drowned children and taking living ones to replace them. Her story figures prominently in Day of the Dead ceremonies in Mexico, Central America, and the US, where some dress up like her. Storyteller Joe Hayes grew up hearing about La Llorona as a boy in Arizona and wrote a book about her. Here's his version of the story.
A long time ago, in a very small town, there was a beautiful girl, and she was so proud of her beauty, she would have nothing to do with young men from the town.
Okay, so far so good.
And then a handsome man arrived in the town, and she decided, oh, that's the man I'm going to marry. And she did marry him, but before long, he started going off, drinking with his friends, chasing after other women, and she became very jealous of the children they had had together.
Then things go from bad to worse.
One evening, she grew so jealous of her children and the attention they got from her husband that she couldn't tolerate it anymore, and she threw them into the river. And then she chased them down the riverbank and fell and struck her head, and she was killed. But she could not rest in peace, and she still walks up and down the bank of the river looking for her children.
The details of the myth vary. In some versions, her name is Maria, and she sees her husband with another woman before killing their kids. In another, she's a vain woman who comes home from a night of partying to find her kids had drowned from her own neglect. In still another, she throws herself into the river after the children to save them, but it's too late. But the basics of the stories stay the same: vanity, jealousy, violence, and regret. And the legend of La Llorona goes back a very long time.
Some people even trace it back to the Greek myth of Jason and Medea. That theme of a mother who kills her children has such a grip on people's imagination that it has turned up in many places. But for some reason, the story of La Llorona has really persisted longer than most of the other traditional stories. It's one of the few stories that people still tell to their children.
The idea that La Llorona is cursed to wail and weep for her lost children also touches on a universal theme, Joe says.
That has sparked people's imaginations all around the world. So those are some of the main themes. Of course, in ghost stories, there's always the idea that a person can't rest at peace if they leave some business unfinished, if they died with some kind of a heavy weight on their soul, they're never going to be able to rest in peace. That turns up in essentially every ghost story in the world.
La Llorona strikes fear into the hearts of kids and adults who grew up hearing the myth alike. Before La Llorona's premiere at South by Southwest, a curandero, or traditional healer, showed the audience how to ward off evil spirits. And even for those who haven't grown up hearing about her, the film proves to be terrifying.
Rinsing.
Sometimes the best ghost stories are the ones that have been scaring us for centuries.
An arranged marriage to a ghost. That was this young woman's greatest nightmare, and one that became her reality in a new Netflix show, The Ghost Bride. Scarier still, this custom is not just a fairy tale gone wrong. In fact, ghost marriages are a little known but very real practice, spoken about only in whispers among the Chinese diaspora in Southeast Asia.
Traditionally, the dead usually marry the dead, in which there would be ghostly arranged marriages for family reasons or reasons of romantic love. And very occasionally, the living would marry the dead.
The Netflix show is based on the New York Times bestseller by Yang Zichu, who grew up hearing stories about ghost marriages. A story her friend told her about his uncle's own unholy matrimony 20 years ago stuck with her.
His grandmother woke up from a dream in which she said her deceased son had visited her, and he told her, "Mum, I've met this girl in the underworld and I'd like to get married."
In the dream, her son told her the name and the address of the family. Sure enough, his grandmother tracked down the family, and they said their late daughter also came to them in a dream, letting them know she'd like to marry her son.
The two families got together, they set up a whole wedding. They had the complete ceremony, and when you do have a ghost marriage, a Chinese ghost marriage, you'll get everything, including like the sedan chair, like people showing up, pledging to each other. That family was considered part of their extended family. And when they had large family gatherings, they'd be like, well, this is Uncle so-and-so's family, and they're also attending. So the ghost marriage is still very much alive.
A similar case was documented by the Singapore paranormal investigators, who said two sets of parents who didn't know each other learned in their dreams their deceased children wanted to be married.
This is the classic Chinese ghost story, which occurs when ghosts appear always to family members in dreams.
Traditionally, the practice was a way for a poor family to survive. A girl who might otherwise starve would be sent to live with the wealthy family on the condition she worked as their servant and married their deceased son.
Just a very difficult life, I think. And for a young girl, the end of all your hopes and dreams.
That's the story depicted in Yang Zi's novel, with a supernatural twist. Yang Zi got her inspiration from a decrepit mansion she visited in her childhood.
The thing that really struck me as a child was how, in many ways, frightening it was. It was half ruined. Like the roof was gone, there was grass growing up through it. It was the decay of an ancient house.
She hadn't told the creators of the Netflix show about the mansion, so Yang Zi was shocked to find they had decided to film The Ghost Bride in that exact spot. The house is now a ritzy hotel named the Blue Mansion.
It was coincidence, complete coincidence.
For InsideEdition.com, I'm Johanna Lee.
A big moment for the ring bearer coming in on a remote-controlled toy car. Oh no, he's asleep at the wheel. But the only ticket this kid gets is one for cuteness in the first degree.
Chaos at a little boy's birthday party. A freak wind sent a bouncy house flying across the family's backyard in Wills Point, Texas. Everybody chased it to try to stop the giant inflatable. Fortunately, no one was injured.
Oh! Oh! There it goes. It's moving.
Meet the guys of Ghost Nation. Jason Hawes, Steve Gonzalez, and Dave Tango.
We are paranormal investigators.
Their paranormal reality show, Ghost Hunters, ushered in what became a beloved TV format of hunting ghosts in the dark and contacting the dead. Their show went off the air after 11 bone-chilling seasons. Now, 3 years later, they're back with a new show on the Travel Channel.
So, let me get these other cameras set up.
Okay, dude.
The Ghost Nation guys aren't just going after the jump scares.
Whoa!
They're exploring claims of the supernatural through science, research, and truth.
This is what we've been talking about for years. IMFs right there like that. I mean, paranoia, fatigue, hallucination, skin irritation.
If it's happening here in the physical world, it has to obey the laws of science and physics.
Going in trying to look for a real explanation. If you're going in looking for a haunting, then you've already, sort of contaminated yourself.
Sometimes the best thing Jason, Steve, and Dave can do is not find ghosts at all.
Helping a family doesn't always come from the paranormal. We're actually able to, through a deep dive of history and research, figure out for a woman that this particular gentleman did not die there in her home, and now she's not afraid to be in her house. That's not in her head anymore. Could the high energy and EMF in the house be working as a catalyst?
Fueling the activity?
Fueling the activity. The focus very much is on helping families and people that are afraid to be in their home or their business.
Seeing that video, I thought to myself that we are not alone here. There is something else in this house. I'm scared for my family, and I want to get them to safety.
Stemming from that, we captured some of the best evidence we've ever caught.
Getting chills just thinking about it.
While the Ghost Nation guys use high-tech gadgets and techniques like EMF detectors and night vision cameras, they say you don't need to be a pro in order to investigate the dead. Here are their tips.
You want to establish some communication. You just use a digital recorder. You can use your phone, right? What we like to do is build rapport with what could be here. Because if it has intelligence, talking to it about things it would be familiar with, you're more likely to get an interaction than if you're just stomping around saying, I know you're here, show yourself.
And that's the hardest thing, is getting used to talking when nothing's there in front of you.
Do your research, find the names that were here, the people that were here, and use those names.
I mean, we've tried all the names, and we know we got an interaction when we're talking about Emma.
It's all about trying to make sure that you get the most honest evidence out there and keep it real. So they can set up their phone or a digital recorder or a camera. They can ask questions. They can also leave it rolling at night when they're asleep and see if they're able to document anything at that point, too.
Tips that could come in handy right where Jason, Steve, and Dave are sitting. McSorley's Old Ale House in New York's East Village, believed to be the oldest continuously operating bar in New York City. It was opened in 1854 by an Irish immigrant named John McSorley.
If you think about just throughout history how many lives have touched this ancient bar here, I think it has a connection, it has the vibrations of ages ago, of the lives and spirits of those people.
The beloved institution has led to some chilling tales.
I believe that McSorley's has the spirits of many of our customers. One of the men who lived upstairs, his name was Bobby Bowles. His last request when he died was that his ashes be put in his drinking flask and the flask left behind the bar. So that's Bobby in there. And we keep him right up here next to JFK. We have about 8 of our customers, their ashes are hanging behind the bar there.
Some McSorley's patrons even say they've encountered spirits.
The chairs will slide across the floor. We suspect it's one of John McSorley's children. He had one young daughter that was killed out front the bar.
It's a place that was so important to individuals. A lot of times they'll come back and spend more time. But also you have residual type haunts where the energy could be trapped within an object that makes up the structure here.
McSorley's has always been a place of comfort and respite and solace, and we welcome everyone here at McSorley's, including all the ghosts and spirits past.
Maybe we should come back for a drink.
I'm down.
Yeah.
I'm good.
I'm down.
Get some rum and a haunted tavern.
Perfect.
Have spirits where there may be spirits.
Because everybody here knows that the man is a werewolf.
It's the strange case of a man named Teese, who claimed to be a werewolf. It happened in 1691 in what is now Latvia. Historian Bruce Lincoln explains.
Old Teese is a Latvian peasant He lives in a small town. He's up in his 80s, and he's scheduled to appear as a witness in a trial that's being held. There apparently was a theft from the local church, and he is somehow knowledgeable, and he's waiting to take the oath before he testifies. And in that moment, one of his fellow villagers snickers and catches the judge's attention. And the judge asks this fellow, "What are you laughing about?" And he says, "Well, old Teese is about to take this oath, and how is that possible? Because everybody here knows the man is a werewolf." And in that moment, the whole trial shifts, and attention focuses on old Teese, and the judges say, "Is this true?" And he says, "Well, yes, it is true. I am a werewolf." And suddenly we have the trial of old Teese emerging out of this earlier trial. And he freely admits to being a werewolf. He lives in an area that is to werewolves what Transylvania is to vampires.
I am Dracula.
There are rumors and legends about werewolves everywhere, and there's a large body of thought about werewolves that circulates in church documents, court documents, learned treatises, and all of these maintain that werewolves are agents of Satan, demonic powers, responsible for the theft of livestock and for riotous behavior of various sorts.
Old Teese surprised the court by telling them werewolves were actually good, not evil.
And instead of confessing to be an agent of Satan, which is what all the judges expect and demand, he refuses, and he says, "You've got everything wrong. Werewolves are not what you think. They're forces of God, not Satan. We battle against witches and sorcerers and satanic powers constantly. We enter hell as invaders on behalf of our community. Our goal is to recover everything that the demonic forces have stolen from the people. And, you have to understand that we're, inspired agents of good."
Part of the positive image of werewolves provided by Teese includes also let's say, not only the fight against witches, but also the recovery of seeds which have been stolen by the witches and brought to hell. So fertility is part of the positive image of werewolves.
And at the end of the trial, the judges, who legally must have either an eyewitness to satanic collusion or a confession, they simply don't know what to do. They throw up their hands, they can't reach a verdict, they refer the case to a higher court so that they don't have to deal with it. The higher court convicted Teese, and they inflicted a relatively minor punishment on him. He was subjected to, I think it was 20 blows in public, but he got off lightly compared to some of his predecessors.
And just how did Teese become a werewolf?
The turning point, how to become a werewolf, was related to drinking beer.
It's something of an initiation. An older werewolf takes someone like Teese, who is not yet a werewolf, gives him a glass of beer that he's blown over 3 times and infused with his breath, and says, "Take this and you will be like me." And when the new werewolf drinks that, he acquires the ability to transform himself into a werewolf and joins a band of others.
Lincoln and fellow scholar Carlo Ginzburg were fascinated by the case and co-wrote the recent book Old Teese, A Livonian Werewolf. The two don't always agree on how to make sense of this old world werewolf, but they agree that the story of Teese is fascinating.
We almost never hear a werewolf speaking in his own voice. And to hear such a voice is extremely unusual.
And the question remains, did old Teese actually turn into a wolf?
He at one point says he put on a wolf's pelt, the cloak of a wolf, ran about on all 4s, stole livestock, pigs and cattle and such, devoured them, although he insists that they were cooked. He did not eat them raw. My own sense of this is that to be a wolf means to be a predator and means to be outside the law. Locals occasionally steal cattle and sheep, and sometimes maybe even horses, pigs certainly, from the nobles. And when they do so, they experience themselves as predatory outlaws, aka wolves.
After being married to the ghost of a 300-year-old pirate for nearly 3 years, Amanda Sparrow Large says their relationship has ended.
I do know that the marriage is over and looking into ways to dissolve it. How that's going to work is still a bit of a mystery.
Amanda and her husband, who's depicted here in a Jack Sparrow-esque painting, made headlines for their 2016 wedding last year.
I'm the first person in the UK and Ireland to marry posthumously. So there was really no precedent in the law here as to whether you could or couldn't do it. There was just nothing.
She says when deceased pirate John Teague contacted her spiritually, she had some doubts until he proved himself by telling her historic facts she later Googled and found to be true.
I had found by the Christmas that I had developed romantic feelings for him, which was very unusual because I had never heard of anybody developing romantic feelings for a spirit energy that they worked with.
They were married on international waters in high spirits. But she says that didn't last long.
Well, the wedding day itself was a disaster. Everything went wrong. And pretty much from there on in, I had probably the worst run of luck that anybody could imagine.
Amanda says that's when her health started to decline.
Unfortunately, Jack was taking far too much energy and literally draining me, and pretty much just using me for his own selfish intentions.
She says when she asked him to stop, he didn't.
He showed a different side to himself, and it wasn't very nice, and it was very negative. And I realised that yes, that Jack was definitely using me as a host to drain my energy.
But breaking up with a spirit isn't easy. Amanda says she will use exorcism if she has to. In the meantime, she's using her experience to warn others.
And if it can happen to me, definitely somebody that's dabbling in this and doesn't know what they're doing, there will be some spirit out there who will just, see an all-you-can-eat buffet and they'll be like, hello.
I'm Kelly Nealon for InsideEdition.com.